Gaining attention. It's how we start our speeches. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about how attention getters work and the best attention getters to use for your speeches. So the very first thing that you say when you start a speech is going to be your attention getter. It is the hook that makes the audience interested in wanting to listen to you. So moving forward, we're going to get past the "hi, my name is" part and instead start with a hook. There are several different ways that you can begin your speech. One of them is to refer to the occasion. This makes sense mostly in terms of ceremonial speeches. So at a graduation, you might say something like, "We're all gathered here to celebrate the graduates," or at a wedding toast, you would say, "We're here to, celebrate the happy couple," that sort of thing. Referring to the occasion doesn't make a lot of sense in a classroom speech because we're obviously all here for the same occasion, and it's not a celebratory speech in quite that same way. Another way is to refer to recent or historical events. This would be a perfectly acceptable way to start your speeches, as long as the reference makes sense and it ties into the topic that you are talking about. Generally, I think recent events are probably more in line with something your audience would find interesting than historical events, but that is up to you in terms of your speech topic and what you think would be interesting. Another way is to start with a quotation. Quotations make good attention getters because they are worded in a specific way, and it's that wording that hooks the audience. One bit of caution, though, when you use a quotation is that you need to start by looking at the camera and your audience when you are presenting. So if you have a quotation, you probably need to have it memorized, because the last thing that you want to do is start by reading something, because then you're not making eye contact and you're not connecting with the audience. So that's totally fine. It just puts a little bit more pressure on you when you are getting ready to do your speech, because you have to have that little bit memorized at the beginning. So something to think about if you're moving towards a quotation. Another way to start is questions. But for this class, we're not going to use rhetorical questions, really, or questions of any kind to start your speech. The reason why is because, remember, the point of the attention getter is to have a broad hook that gets the audience interested in your topic. So we don't start by saying, "my topic." When we use questions, really all that we're doing is putting our topic in the form of a question. So you might say something like, "How many of you are familiar with what euthanasia is?" Or "How many of you play college sports?" Those are really just your topics. You're just putting them out there in the form of a question. The other thing is, it really doesn't make a lot of sense in this format because I can't see you and there's no engagement when you ask the question. So for this class, we're going to avoid questions as an attention getter. So I really want to spend the last minute or so of this presentation talking to you about what I do think would make excellent attention getters for this speech. So the first is stories. Stories are a great way to connect with your audience. Those stories can be personal, stories about your own life, and that adds an extra bit of connection to the audience because they understand how you're attached to the topic. But it doesn't have to be your own story. It can be someone else's story. And as you start to do your research for your informative and persuasive speeches, you'll find lots of good examples of stories that work as hooks. So if you're going to tell a story, just put the story out there. One word of caution, though, is don't use the idea of imagine when you're telling the story. So instead of starting by saying, "Imagine this thing happens to you," just tell us someone else's story and let us empathize with that person. Finally, statistics. I think statistics are an excellent way to start speeches. So statistics will let us grab the audience attention by giving us a breadth of the topic. So it makes us understand sort of how big or the scope of something. And that's a really effective way to hook the audience and have them want to learn more about what you're speaking about. So statistics can range anywhere from the amount of something to the number of people affected, etc. And I think these would be a very effective way to start your informative speech. One last word of caution: humor. So I think it's odd that the book lists humor as its own kind of attention getter, because I want to be very clear that humor by itself isn't an attention getter. So like telling a joke and then moving into your topic is not a successful way to hook the audience. However, if you have humor like in a story or as part of your attention getter, that's always great. But just remember that what somebody finds funny may not be funny to someone else. So we have to keep that humor kind of at a tasteful and pretty generic level. So those are some ways that you can gain your audience's attention at the beginning of your speech. These will be particularly important as we get to the informative and the persuasive speech, and as the attention getters start to become more important for getting the audience involved.